Hello and welcome. Today I'll be showcasing a new update for Conquer the Tree. Now, I haven't actually programmed an update for Conquer the Tree in a little while, but I decided to get back into it, which, with what I thought would be a small update, became a much larger one, because the main focus that I had for this update was performance, but in order to increase the performance, it actually affected a lot of other aspects of the code, which I'll get to later, and it became a lot more of a bigger task for myself. But for right now, I'm going to quickly go through all the medium changes that I did, and then go over kind of the big change of the performance, and go a little bit more in depth with that. Alright, so the first change that I made, which I don't know if you'll be able to hear right now, but I changed the timer, or the eating leaf sound. I actually have it quieted at this point until it gets to the last 10 seconds, to where you'll really be able to hear it. But instead of just the kind of obnoxious crunching sound, it's a lot more softer sound, especially whenever I have it at 33% of volume. And now you should be able to hear that it's gotten to a much louder sound as it crunches for the last 10 seconds here. Moving on, you can see that these bugs now have a slight highlight around them. Now, I actually planned on adding this a while ago, but never could really get it right, or whatever I thought of doing would require a lot of work, but I finally figured out how to do it, and it looks pretty cool. Another thing in this path forming section here is you can see that this disabled submit button right here, it wasn't actually always displaying due to some conflicting code that I made, but it should be working now. Alright, and another change which you'll see here that I made is that whenever you eat a leaf or you interact with a bird or squirrel, the path will now update based off of the spot. So as you can see here, now the whole path is brown instead of just the spot being brown, as it used to be. And the same logic applies for whenever you run into a bird or squirrel. Before, the paths would be red, or the spot and the paths would be red. You interact with it and only the spot would change to orange. Now everything changed to orange, and that makes the feel of it just flow a lot better, which is essentially kind of the theme of this small update that I've made. Now, another change that I've done is, as you can see here, this is the second round where it's kind of pointing to the power-ups here, but if I hit roll, you can now see that during the second round it'll also say, eat as many leaves as you can. This is just a small hint that I found that a lot of people were running into the issue of not knowing you could actually go into multiple leaves and eat multiple leaves during one round. So this kind of clarifies that you can eat as many leaves as you can. Now, something that goes along with this is that during the second round, you'll also get these check marks that'll kind of vibrate here to kind of show that, yes, you have gotten that leaf, and to, clarify a bit more. And you can see that if I go to another one, like over here, you can see the same thing happens, and yeah, it's just to kind of clarify what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then I actually added another like kind of hint down here as well during like bird mini games. It's just a little hint while playing. Focus on the screen here, just so people don't kind of look back and forth. And just kind of a little thing. I don't want to be too obnoxious with these hints, because there are kind of getting a decent amount of them. They should be things that it's like, if you're first playing the game, you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And it's definitely been a problem that I've seen with the two hints of not eating more than one leaf, and then also looking at the phone. I just don't want it to become a thing where each time you play you're like, oh yes, I know. It should be a thing that just kind of fades into the background, so hopefully this doesn't become an issue and it's not too bothersome. If it is, be sure to let me know. And actually, for any changes or bugs that you find, be sure to let me know. I'll definitely be looking for it, and fixing the game, making changes, and because people are buying it, and I want to make sure that they get the entertainment that they were looking for with this. And I think it's a really good game, and I hope that nothing really gets in the way of that necessarily. Alright, so this next change, or I guess I should say bug fix, was actually most prevalent in winter. It was to where basically you'd have these random like red spots on the tree where there was no squirrels or birds. And I think the reason for this was actually due to, let's say like right here there's a red spot and then this branch all of a sudden grew out. How that would work is it basically clone this object here, and upon cloning it would keep the same sprite, which would just default it to like a bird minigame. But I think I have now fixed this issue by now setting this default every time that it grows to just an orange sprite, so should no longer run into that issue. There are of course some other changes that I made that I can't really show off too well. One of them being that I kind of increased the robustness of the communication for the controllers in the actual game. This would be most prevalent on like mini games, to where basically now you can't or the game won't accept a minigame message unless it's actually in a minigame. So this would prevent any errors from running in case it's looking for an object that's not there because the minigame isn't active. And this also includes the beginning with the play, the how-to, and the exit. Whenever you hit down on your controller, it would typically only deselect the bottom one and not the top and bottom at the same time, waiting for its next input. This was because it was actually colliding with some other script in there, so now that should be working. Also, there is whenever the game starts, typically what I would do is in Unity I'd press start and then the game would just start, regardless of if I've actually set it all up correctly and I have tilt spot here. Instead now, tilt spot automatically sends a message saying tiltspot.onReady, so the game will essentially now wait for that message to be sent, and then it will then start up the game. So now all the processes are paused until that happens. So it's just, again, increasing the robustness of the whole system of it. And so that goes on to the last thing that I did, which was what I said was the main part of it, which was the performance. As you can see, it's during winter, and there's not really an obvious performance drop here, as there would typically be. Now, this is due to a lot of things, a lot of changes. Well, not necessarily a lot of changes, but there was like one or two major changes that I did that really helped out. Then I had to do a lot of minor changes with it due to a lot of how I structured the game. So actually, let me quickly open up Unity here, and you can see that the one thing that I should have done was lower the quality of the actual game. As you can see here, it was automatically set to ultra, but if I just go down, you can see that it still runs completely fine on low, but then very low it of course gets to too low of a quality. But on low, it actually improved the quality greatly, and I didn't see any compromises in the gameplay with any of the sprites or anything like that. But of course the main issue with that was that a lot of the game pieces that I had running with this was dependent upon the frame rate because of how I ran it. If I open up the script here, you can see, for example, right here, this is the timer that goes across. Initially, I just have a normal for loop, which would look like this. Let's say 300 seconds, and I typically run it like this, with of course, a yield return null right below it, or in it. And so then this would return, and it would just keep on doing this each time that a frame went by. But due to this, whenever I got a higher frame rate, this was activating much quicker than anticipated. So I had to go through, for every for loop that I put in my game, I had to go back and change it into kind of this formatted for loop here, as well as change some of the structure of what goes on here. So you can see now I'm using a float and I'm doing time.delta time, which it does say to use time.delta time in a lot of tutorials that you see out there, but I kind of ignored it and I didn't really do it. It's kind of actually the same issue that I've ran into for um, Villain Rewind as well, which I fixed, but Villain Rewind was in between first making Conquer the Tree and then to now, so I didn't know about it then. But it's just very important to keep track of time to delta time and also the frame rate in which your game runs at. Because, like, for example, a good way to test this is to run your game in this window view mode here, and then also in the maximize view here. Because whenever it's in the maximize view, it'll actually run a lot smoother. As you can see here, this is an example of the game actually waiting for TiltSpot to respond that it's connected, but it's not, because I'm already running an instance here. But yeah, you can see that those were kind of most of the changes that I did. And of course, going through and making the small changes to the code for a lot of things meant that I had to make a lot of mini changes. In which some of it I just did because I'm like, well, I'm working on it, might as well make it look a bit better. For example, in the beginning part, which I'll just bring up here, the leaf will now animate a lot better in this section. It's also much louder. There we go. Turn it down. Okay, so yeah, you can see that the leaf it looks a lot better whenever I hit play. It does its own little animation here. So yeah, it's just small changes that were prompted by a small change that I had to do already to it. And you can see another thing that I did, you can see it's a bit frame ratey in this first section here, which I'm not too bothered by. It kind of adds to the aesthetic of fast forwarding. But something that I found is, of course, I'm using preview packages with these sprite renders here, which I can actually open up here. As you can see, I'm using these, sprite shape controllers, renderers, things like that, and it's actually a preview package because it says preview packages in use. So the problem with that is that it's actually way over there. The problem with that is that whenever I opened up the profiler, which is another thing that I didn't know about, again, I actually did research this time for performance instead of just like, it's kind of lagging in winter. I'm just going to decrease the quality of the particle systems and do less particles essentially. But this profiler here gives you a lot of info, and I found that the sprite shape renders were actually costing a lot of the performance. So of course I went in and I made a change to where now the sprite shapes will actually update every 6 frames. So like the trunk would update, then this branch would update, then that branch, that branch, that branch, and that branch, and it would just cycle through like that instead of them all activating at once, meaning I actually saved a lot of frames doing that. And it's actually a pretty smart system. Now, of course, anytime I change any aspect of the tree here, it causes a lot of unbalanced mechanics to where basically like the tree wasn't growing as tall, or it was growing too much, too many leaves, too many acorns, or the birds and squirrels weren't coming in, going out. So it was just a lot of issues that I had to rebalance due to the change. So you'll see that some of the game mechanics have slightly changed with how the tree grows and what happens on the tree, but hopefully it's still a good playable and balanced experience, and I hope you still enjoy it. So yeah, that's it for this update. One more thing is that if you have, I did some bug fixing for if you entered in a really long name, that it won't cover up any of the like the scoreboard or the player order up here, and then also on the sticky note it wouldn't be there, as well as in the pause menu. In the pause menu here, if you went to the next line, it would actually mess up kind of the font. But now if you go on to the next line, it should mess it up. But yes, that is all the stuff that I have to show for this update. Just makes it a more fluid experience and something that I'm really proud about, as kind of the performance and kind of the rigidity of most of this stuff was kind of something that I wanted to look into, and I finally looked into. So I hope you all enjoy your Conquer the Tree new update, and yeah, I'll see you later.